equips, and empowers you to have uncomfortable conversations on hot topics with people who don't share your same beliefs. Your host, Katrina Esau, Sabrina Protic, Ricky Burney, and Walter Parker. Now let's get ready to have that conversation. Uncomfortable Conversations is powered by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship on Facebook.
Welcome to the Uncomfortable Conversations morning show. My name is Ricky Burney, and I am here with our amazing co-host, Sabrina Protic. How are you today, Sabrina?
I'm fine, Ricky. We are, as we mentioned, Uncomfortable Conversation. My name is Sabrina Protic. Our mission each week is to encourage, equip, and empower our listeners and viewers to have uncomfortable conversations on personal and social issues that impact our lives. Each week, we choose trending topics that create us a moment to pause and think about and reflect on our lives in this systematic racism, criminal justice, police brutality, and any other trending topics that impact our lives. Today, we're going to talk about legalized marijuana and the ethical or unethical side to that. A blog was written on this issue of legalized marijuana in 2017, and it stated, most of the arguments against marijuana are centered on the use of the drug or escapism and pleasure. Is it morally right or wrong to be high? 70s terminology. Providing a solution to this dilemma is not as easy as pointing out the wrongness of crimes such as murder or rape. Therefore, the marijuana debate cannot be held on similar platforms as these crimes and needs a philosophical analysis to identify the moral rightness of neutrality in our world today. I have the pleasure of having this uncomfortable conversation with our host, Ricky Burney, author of the book Destined for Greatness: 90 Days of Transformational Affirmation. Ricky, you mentioned earlier on this topic some time ago that this was a hot topic. Can you share with our listeners your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So obviously, legalized marijuana, that is a very hot topic for many people. We have our own specific perspective on it. The people, the listeners, everyone has their own perspective on it. But let's get what the philosophers, what their perspective based on their viewpoints, what that would be. So the first one we're going to go to is Aristotle, based on his views about human nature, ethics, and proper function. He argues that our proper function as human beings involves the use of reason. If we want to flourish as human beings, we must use reason to help us decide how we ought to live so that we cultivate virtue. For Aristotle, there is a form of reason that is practical, which we ought to use to make choices that foster our individual well-being and contribute to the common good. This leads to true happiness, which he takes to be activity of soul in accordance with virtue. If any activity undermines or degrades our rational capacities, then we have a moral reason to avoid that activity. This does not show that one should never smoke pot, nor does it entail anything about the legalization of marijuana. But it does show that there is a moral reason to avoid smoking pot that gets lost in the debates about marijuana use. If marijuana use does undermine our rational capacity, then for Aristotle, it will also undercut our ability to instantiate moral virtues, such as honesty, trustworthiness, and responsibility, which depend on the proper use of those capacities. At some level of use, Aristotle would advise us to not smoke marijuana for the sake of our character and our happiness. Sabrina, do you have some other research or information that you would like to share about that topic?
Yes, I do, Ricky. Thank you for that information. In an article, The Atlantic, Ben Konoskop points out that Kant's categorical imperative includes the moral maxim of universality. Act only according to that maximum, whereby you can at the same time that it should be a universal law without contradiction. In other words, let's explain this and break this down. If your action were to be the action everyone was taking, would you still do it? Kantian's ethics is an aspirational approach to the individual choice autonomy and what one's individual rights and duties to others are. However, a more realistic approach would be to weigh the probability of the universal adoption of action. Marijuana use in moderation does not violate Kant's moral maximum. A world where everyone smokes once in a while would not be much different than the world we live in. However, it would be shown that excessive use does lead to addiction and other forms of self-destructive behavior. Then society as a whole then would be negatively impacted by legalizing pot. Kant would object to push the legalization of marijuana, arguing that just like other drugs, marijuana violates an individual's duty to respect their rational behavior. Ricky, you want to lean in on that a little more?
Yes. However, Kant is clear about the autonomy of the user. Regulating the drug can be hardly achieved. Marijuana is usually abused, leading to addiction, cognitive damage, or even short-term memory loss. In this case, marijuana infringes on the user's freedom. When a user becomes addicted, his or her deeds will be determined by whether or not they have taken the drug. The decisions that such a person makes are not devoid of the consequences of his or her state. Therefore, a marijuana addict cannot act or reason in autonomy. The use of marijuana in dealing with emotional issues, whether through medical prescription or for recreation, contradicts Kant's formula on morality. It states that one's dignity ought not to be compromised even in the face of overall utility. Through the subtext of the categorical imperative, Kant continues to state that if a person destroys his body in an effort to escape from a difficult life situation, the person is merely using his person as a means. This emotional escapism that is offered by marijuana and the severe side effects that a user is exposed to proves this. A person using marijuana utterly destroys his life in a desperate move to achieve perceived peace of mind instead of taking advantage of the challenge to acquire adaptive energy. A very powerful statement. But Sabrina, did you have any other thoughts, any last thoughts about Kant's perspective on morality in regards to marijuana?
Yes, so our attempt this morning is to provide a little bit of research so we can understand and give ourselves a platform before we kind of weigh in on this. So Kant's position may seem extreme in today's world. We need more data to definitively determine whether occasional use, consistent use, or excessive use is harmful to oneself or our society. When we're thinking about the ethics of marijuana use, you have to think about not only the obligation to someone, to yourself, but also to others. So overuse can lead to abuse and addiction, which can hurt a person's relationships, their work, and their health. It could also impinge on their ability to realize the goals or even to develop themselves fully. Still, if someone is not prone to addiction or can use it without causing any great harm or impact to themselves or the lives of others, it seems like an allowable indulgence. Use in moderation, there does not seem to be anything inherently wrong with it. But what counts as moderation? What is that in part? How do we determine what moderation is? It depends so much on the person as to whether they are prone to an addictive behavior or not. One of the problems is that you cannot really know in advance. There's no way to know if someone's able to handle it, if someone can't, if someone will have an addictive behavior, and some won't. The risk is a place where the waters get very, very muddy. Ricky, we're going to take a sponsor break, and when we come back, we're going to introduce to you our panel guests to get their perspectives on legalized marijuana, ethical or unethical. We'll be right back.
For centuries, humans have been using substances to alter their state of mind, from caffeine, cigarettes, and alcohol to more extreme drugs. But as the most commonly used illicit drug in North America, where does marijuana fit in, and how exactly does it affect your brain? First, we need to understand how the brain functions. Your neurons are the cells that process information in the brain. By releasing chemicals called neurotransmitters from the axon of one neuron to the dendrite of another, they change the electrical charge of the receiving neuron, consequently exciting or inhibiting it. If excited, the signal is passed on. Though it sounds simple, these signals work together and the effect is quickly compounded into complex configurations within milliseconds, flushing over the entire brain. This is what happens every single time you think, breathe, or move. So what's going on inside your brain when you're smoking marijuana? Well, unlike alcohol, which contains molecules nothing like those in our body, cannabis contains molecules that resemble those produced in our very own brains, cannabinoids. Though naturally, these cannabinoids circulate in much lower quantities compared to the large influx imposed by smoking. Specifically, the chemical tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, resembles a natural transmitter called anandamide. These cannabinoids are specialized neurotransmitters released by neurons having just fired. Neurons temporarily become unresponsive after firing to prevent them from overreacting or being too dominant. This allows your brain to function in a calm and controlled manner, but cannabinoids interrupt this approach in some parts of the brain. Instead, they remove the refractory period of neurons that are already active and cause your thoughts, imagination, and perception to utterly magnify itself. This means once you begin your train of thought, it becomes the most significant and profound thing ever. You can't see the big picture or even recall your last epiphany because you're caught up in the momentum of a particular idea, and your neurons keep firing until a new idea takes hold and you go off on a new tangent. These cannabinoids also affect the levels of dopamine and norepinephrine in your brain, often leading to a sense of euphoria, relaxation, pain modulation, and general enhancement of an experience, though sometimes causing anxiety. Furthermore, there are cannabinoid receptors in areas controlling short-term memory, learning, coordination, movement control, and higher cognitive functions.
Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe for more weekly science videos.
Uncomfortable Conversations Talk Radio is sponsored by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship. You can follow all our hosts on Facebook. Search Trendsetter Mentor Group and join. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversation. I must say I appreciated that video. I do well with crayon coloring. I kind of got it now. I knew about THC, but I didn't have that scientific explanation and how the memory loss and cognitive behavior. So that was a really nice explanation. So here we are with this trending topic on legalized marijuana, ethical or unethical. Ricky and I, we've kind of shared some of the research, some of the data, and the research views on this topic. And now we want to call upon our uncomfortable conversation with our panel guest. Ricky, can you formally introduce our panel on today's topic?
Absolutely. We have our returning guest, who is Ariel Giordano, who is the author of the book, Dancing with Your Story from the Inside Out. Welcome back, Ariel. And now we also have our very first time guest, David Hart. He is the CEO of M3 Link of Florida, a private invite-only community connected entrepreneurs, influential business leaders, celebrities, CEOs, inventors, founders, startups, and investors. Let me tell you what, that sounds like a lot to unpack. And what we want to do is we want to get directly into that and just get more information on how this amazing group, how that is going to impact the Tampa Bay community. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about M3 Link, the vision and mission of this community.
M3 Link is a community of entrepreneurs, business owners, celebrities, CEOs, where the primary focus is on how do we give to each other to help each other out. It's not about what you get, it's about what you give. And, everyone knows that when you give, you're going to receive more in return. The nice thing is, as a startup or a small business, many times the owners or principals don't have access to hire consultants or other folks because it's outside their reach. And within the community, you find that the community is always willing to lend a helping hand so that everyone has multiple safety nets of people that are willing to just help them. And the nice thing about that is that when you're starting out in a business, there's typically more that you don't know than you do know on your journey. And having people there that don't have a predetermined bias on trying to sell you things or services, that would just genuinely want to help you, makes it so that the probability of your success goes way up. What's also different about the community is that since it's business owners, and it's not the salespeople that have a sales production quota. It's the folks that have that flexibility, that can share their war stories of what worked for them, what did not work for them, how they progressed on their journey, and so it makes it so it's not like your typical group where you'll have people that are their employees that have sales goals. This is people that just generally want to help. Is it a unique organization? In some aspects, but in other ways, there are other organizations that are similar, but the entry point or cost to entry point could be $7,000 or $25,000 a year, which most smaller businesses, that's just not attainable.
Absolutely. And you said something that was very key, especially in entrepreneurship, is building that community, because the depth of entrepreneurship is the isolation aspect. When you try to do everything on your own, try to learn all the ins and outs of it by yourself, but you can start to thrive when you start to have the collaboration and the support of other people who have been exactly where you have. So another question I want to throw to you is, what makes you passionate about this opportunity? Why would you like to share this opportunity with other entrepreneurs?
Well, I can speak in my own case. I in my journey, I spent 20 plus years in the corporate America world, only to have realized that I was in the wrong seat. When your eyes open and you meet all of the folks that are entrepreneurs and the creativity and just the doors that they can open for you that you never expected to even have the ability to open those doors. That's where I get the passion of bringing people in, because, the opportunities that are presented to folks are so far outside of what the normal expectation of is that the sky's the limit, and being able to help people transform from doing something to being hugely successful is so rewarding.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to read this quote from a notable CEO within M3 Link, and it's a very detailed statement that just sounds amazing. So, community as a place where networking moves from a passive exercise to active engagement. At its core, M3 Link is as much about what can one contribute as what can one receive. Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, it's that balance between give and get that creates true value. So that is a wonderfully packaged promise. But to me, what makes the company more reputable is when you have a personal experience. So David, in your personal experience, tell us more about what you received on day one from M3 Link.
From day one, it's kind of funny. Day one, I attended a session as a visitor. And I didn't, it was an in-person session. It wasn't virtual. It was pre-COVID. And I sat next to an older gentleman in the back of the room so I could take a low-key approach to it, not being front and center and sitting there. So I'm sitting next to the individual, and they sit there and tell me that first question out of their mouth was, are you interested in being on a bank board? And I just looked at it like, I have no idea what that means, but of course I am. And here what the opportunity was. The gentleman approached me and say, hey, do you want to help me start a community bank? And immediately all the lights went off in my head, because by creating a community bank that can help service members within M3 Linked, then they have an easier way to obtain capital. So that, you've got somebody that can help you figure out how to get the capital, because as an entrepreneur, we're always struggling for capital. And, later in the same session, I met some folks that were doing some really exciting things with real estate. And, to be honest, at that first meeting, I was the little kid in a candy store where you could eat as much candy as you want, because all I saw was endless opportunities. And the people were so dynamic, and that it was just amazing that, I had to discipline myself to say, what did I want to focus on? Because there's so many opportunities in the room that you didn't see that at a normal networking community event. Because being that it was all business owners or entrepreneurs, they all had a special story to share with you. And they were more than happy to share and give you their life experiences on different things. So seriously, within 10 minutes, I was hooked. And, knowing that it was a newer concept, I was bold enough to say, wait a minute, instead of buying one location, I want to lock down the state of Florida, because these types of ideas thrive when the economy doesn't do well. And then they thrive when the economy does do well, because, there's always a small portion of the population that has entrepreneurial spirit. And those people need places for incubation to grow, thrive, and prosper.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that these entrepreneurs and these CEOs, they all want to share their stories, because I believe the other aspect of being able to connect with people is being able to share your transparent truth about what you've gone through, so that someone else who might be newer in entrepreneurship does not feel as if they're going to be judged, but they know that you're coming from a place of trying to fully support them.
Excellent point, Ricky, because the key thing is that within our community, everyone's equal. There is no this, or there are no levels. Everyone's equal, and everyone comes together. And it doesn't matter what your background is I'm here to see how I can help Ricky, or how I can help Sabrina, and that's what makes everyone prosper.
Absolutely. Now, there was a quote on your website. It states, if your LinkedIn profile is weak instead of strong, you are losing touch with people who are at least curious about you to begin with. If you do not tell a convincing story of how you can solve the problem they came looking for you in the first place, then you have lost them before you even had a chance to talk. If these two things are failing for you, it is time for a makeover.
Very true.
I feel as if I just got two combo punch, like a Mike Tyson punch right then when you said that. But it's a very relevant and honest assessment of LinkedIn and the missed opportunities that many entrepreneurs have with that. So tell us a little bit of how your business will strengthen entrepreneurs in that aspect.
Well, if you think about it, the vast majority of users on LinkedIn approach it as a resume posting service. More and more business is being done on LinkedIn, and because from a sales perspective, it's the ability for folks to be able to really filter through an organization and find the key decision maker almost immediately. But in order to be able to get that meeting with that person that you're trying to find, your profile has to demonstrate that you're legitimate. How do you do that? It's having videos, it's having testimonials, it's having, think about it. We can all go out there and do hundreds and hundreds of Google reviews, And, we're all a little conditioned to know that not all of them are real. But on LinkedIn, when somebody gives you a review, it's from an actual user on LinkedIn, so they can trace that back. And if you really wanted to be in deep dive, you could actually go find that person and talk to them first before talking to your target. So that's one thing. Other things, what most people don't realize is that LinkedIn is in a way a search engine. So optimizing your profile, words, video, and things like that help raise you in the search ratings, because a lot of people consider that once you do a profile, it's done. It's not. It's a living site where you constantly have to be adding to it, outreaching in that, being active. Active users on LinkedIn will post 1 or 2 times per week, and that creates some buzz and energy so that people are there. What I typically will teach a class maybe once a quarter on how to use keywords, ensuring that the keywords are throughout your entire profile so that people, it's easier for people to find you when they do a search.
Absolutely. And something that is also important is that for many people who are, as you stated, business owners, and they're using Facebook, they're using Instagram and all these other different social media platforms, LinkedIn is one of the last platforms that still you can get that organic reach to your target audience. So definitely those are some great tips. And I think that more entrepreneurs should take advantage of that. Thank you so much, David, for sharing all of that information about M3 LinkedIn. And can you give the viewers just a quick synopsis of how they can reach out to you if they want to know more about M3 LinkedIn?
Absolutely. You can either find me on LinkedIn, David Hart, Business Network Entrepreneur. I include those keywords in my name so that it comes into the SEO. Or you can look me up on the web at m3linked.com and then just select Tampa Bay. There, they can request an invitation to come to one of our upcoming M3 Linked forums, where we are meeting on Tuesday mornings currently, and in early January will be Thursday afternoons along with Tuesday mornings. Thank you, Ricky.
Absolutely. Thank you again. We will take our next sponsor break, and we'll be back with the uncomfortable conversation on legalized marijuana.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversation Morning Show. We're having a conversation with our panelists, which you just met, on the recreational use of marijuana and its ethical or unethical use. We would like to ask our panel some common questions and get their perspectives. We need Ariel on the screen as well. This is going to be panel questions. So we're going to start with David, and then we'll defer to Ariel. From your perspective, David, is the recreational use of marijuana ethical or unethical?
I think it's ethical. Do you want just a yes or no answer, or you want some background in my thought process? I say it's ethical because, there's I don't think the government should restrict people on things that are not necessarily immediately dangerous to them. unlike other harder drugs that could have more intense consequences.
Okay. So let's see if we can get Ariel's comments on that. From your perspective, is recreational use of marijuana ethical or unethical?
I would have to say unethical. And the reason why, as my experience as a provisional psychologist and therapist, that in psychology, marijuana is considered, the use of marijuana is considered an altered state of consciousness. So right now we're in our, wakeful consciousness. So using marijuana, we're not completely consciously aware like we would be now. So it changes that state, just like when we're sleeping, we go into an altered state of consciousness. And so for that reason, I will go back to what Ricky said with Kent and that quote about morality and making good choices and reasoning, because it does alter your consciousness and your state of reason, your state of being aware to consciously make decisions as you would, 100% clear in your thinking. Also, I'll add with that with the altered state of consciousness, we live in a world, I would say, that of pain avoidance. Most people want to avoid pain, and they will do, I'm just generally speaking, but most people want to avoid pain, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get out of the pain. So it's kind of an avoidance behavior. Do this so that I can escape. So that's escape. And anyway, so escaping whatever issues people have. Is that the echo or?
Yeah. So
Huh.
no, go ahead. Go ahead and finish your
I
answer.
just escaping pain, whatever that form is taking, and just getting away from it and concentrating more on the escapism of avoidance rather than being totally present here and consciously aware and present. So that's the very short answer. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. That was a great response and a great perspective on that, especially the escapism part. So the next question, and I'll just pose it right back to you, Ariel. What is the long-term impact? What long-term impact do you think it will have on society and our children that follow our examples?
Well, I'd say for say parents and children, the long-term impact would be the behavior if they watch their parents, because again, it's the nurture versus nature. They can put, the DNA of addictive behavior and also watching their parents. So it would be passed down generationally with that behavior of, I have pain in my life, I feel uncomfortable, I don't like what's going on, so I am going to, use marijuana as to avoid it, rather than dealing directly with the problem. The problem doesn't get solved when you escape it. It's still there. And like I've told clients many times, that is somewhere in your psyche, in your body. So down the road, you may get some illness, or later on, it may manifest in other forms in your body and in your mind. And unless you really heal it and let it go. So that would be, I would just say that it just gets passed on generationally of how to deal with life and life and issues through escapism and not deal and heal with it directly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would like to pose that same question to you, David, and I'll just repeat it just so that you have the full context. What is the long-term impact do you think this will have on society and our children that follow our example?
I think the use of marijuana is similar to other mind-altering substances, think about it. You could easily equate it to something similar to alcohol or cigarettes, things like that. I think there is a long-term negative impact on society. But yeah, I mean, you know, individuals should make up their own decisions, but individuals should be more informed on how to make good decisions. And, you know, as Ariel mentioned, that, you know, people are trying to escape the reality. We should probably invest more resources in helping people be able to cope with the reality versus finding ways to escape it. You know, there is a longer term negative impact. You know, if there's cognitive decline due to the use of marijuana, you know, that can't be good. And, you know, and you think about it, if the parents are using it in the household, there could be some unintended consequences on the children and the children's brain development as they grow. So that can easily set them behind their peers that aren't in that same environment. So, you know, I don't necessarily use it, but, you know, I'm not the one that's going to say you can't use it. And I think decriminalizing marijuana would probably create more better outcomes than the negative outcomes that we have today with when things are not standardized.
Absolutely, absolutely. And based on the science and the long-term use, do you think that we will learn that marijuana, similar to cigarettes, is bad for our health? And David, we'll go right back to you for that.
Well, I mean, think about it. You're still inhaling smoke in the one form. So I think that out of the gate will have negative health consequences. I think, you know, for years, nobody has wanted to study the impacts of marijuana because I think governmental agencies were afraid of the outcome. There could be things that are a benefit. You know, I'm not necessarily denying that there could be some medical properties that THC can help people with. You know, but yeah, I mean, I think the medical risks outside of the risk of lung cancer, the bigger risk would be is studying what are the impacts on cognitive ability from long-term excessive use of marijuana.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Ariel, same question to you. Based on the science and the long-term use, do you think that we will learn that marijuana, similar to cigarettes, is bad for our health?
Yes, I definitely do. It is definitely bad for your brain. I have a book called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Dr. Amen. And he specifically says in there that not only does marijuana impair your brain function, but it also induces aggression, you know, aggressive behavior. So, and getting back to what David said, you know, and the previous question, that children being around, children's brains takes 25 years to develop. So that would impact their brain. So, and also the amount of toxins that go into the lungs in just a couple of puffs of marijuana is far greater than even nicotine. And so I would definitely say mentally and physically that it does have ill effects.
Absolutely, and those are very interesting points from both panelists. And you know, this is to me is a very interesting topic because I've known people who have used it and they have thrived in life. They are some trendsetters. They are very insightful. But then I've seen people who've used it and they have stagnated in life. They aren't able to get motivated. They're not ambitious. They have ideas, but they never actually bring them to fruition. So the way that it impacts people is very interesting. And, you know, that would be something that I would like to look more into to see how the drug itself, how it affects an individual, and if there are some other different factors that might contribute to if it's going to be detrimental or beneficial to them. So I just got one more question. I'm going to bring it right back to you, Ariel. Do you feel that the criminal justice system should reduce the sentence of convicted felons that were arrested for drug possession?
For the marijuana use?
Yes.
Yes, I do. And getting back to a previous show, I would go into the mental health aspect of it and reduce the sentence and say that they are required to, just like people with anger management, that they're required to do, 20 weeks of, some type of group. I don't necessarily use the word therapy, but in that vein of, what is their purpose of use, and to go deeper beyond just a behavior. What is your reason? What is motivating you to do this? And just for them to be healthier, mind, body, and spirit, and go there. That would be my recommendation.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And David, same question to you. Do you feel that the criminal justice system should reduce the sentence of convicted felons that were arrested for drug possession in regards to marijuana?
Absolutely. I think that instead of using the resources on incarcerating people, those resources should be used on a massive expansion on rehab and counseling services, because it seems like we've gotten off track in the criminal justice system to try and target folks that really aren't doing a significantly high impact crime on society, and that when you make certain activities illegal, it brings out the worst in people. But instead of punishing people, we should help them get the help that they need through counseling and rehab and things like that. And one thing on the prior question that you had asked, does the use of marijuana, it impacts people differently? But I think some of that also comes from within the person to say, we all act differently based on our own goals and motivations, so that some people will just want to give up and do nothing, and some people will thrive and always are going to thrive with or without some substance.
Absolutely. And, something else to really consider when it comes to convictions with marijuana, let's think about culture, because let's be honest, the culture in America, especially when it comes to pop culture, emphasizes the use of marijuana as being something that makes you cool, makes you someone that's hip. And a person wants to be accepted. So if you have all of these entertainers who promote that, but then at the same time you punish them for engaging what has been placed in front of them, there is a disconnect there. And it also leads to what we have right now, which is mass incarceration. So just something else to consider. And with that being said, we're going to take our next commercial break.
Now it's time for Love It or Leave It, the segment where our hosts decide should you have that uncomfortable conversation or leave it alone.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations Morning Show. We are now at our favorite segment, which is Love It or Leave It, powered by Emerging Excellence LLC, a brand focused on re-engineering the mindsets of millennial professionals. Love It or Leave It, like each week, we read emails from our listeners that need advice from our conversation coaches. And our conversation coaches this week will be our esteemed guests, David Hart, Ariel Giordano, and Sabrina will also be leaning in on these conversations as well. So they have some type of difficult conversation. They need advice on how to go about it. And what we want you all to do is just to lean in on if you feel they should have the conversation, or if you feel that the conversation can be tabled or just completely avoided. Is everyone ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So our first email: my friend is homosexual. and he wants me to march in the next gay parade. But that is where I draw the line. I do not want him to think I am judging him, but I have my Christian beliefs. Last year, I told him I had a family event, but I am running out of excuses. Should I have this uncomfortable conversation, or should I leave it alone? David, we'll start with you.
Have the conversation. I mean, the sooner you have the conversation, the sooner that everyone's on the same level of platform of understanding, so that instead of trying to avoid, have the conversation. Let the person know that you respect them, and but they have to understand and share with them your beliefs.
Absolutely. And Ariel, would you love the conversation, or would you leave that conversation?
Conversation and tell the truth. Relationships are based on honesty and truth. So I would definitely, if you want to have a real relationship, to tell them the truth of how your thoughts and your feelings. Probably, and if you're really a friend, it will usually deepen your relationship.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sabrina, what are your thoughts? Would you love it, or would you leave that conversation alone?
I would have the conversation, because you can only have so many excuses. And I believe that their views are equally as important as mine. So it's not whether gay parade is right or wrong. It's just about my views on marching in a gay parade. So I would just have that conversation.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head right there. It's more so about the boundaries and the experiences of each person in that friendship, because yes, you have your Christian values, but we also can't necessarily say that the person who is identified as a homosexual, you can't necessarily say that that person also doesn't identify as Christian. So, instead of just necessarily placing labels on there, just speak from your heart as to why that is uncomfortable for you, why that is something that you just don't feel comfortable with. It doesn't mean that you don't support them, but you just may not feel at ease being in that environment. And they should be able to respect that from you, just as you respect them for their lifestyle. So that was, everyone hit the nail on the head. I would love the conversation as well. Our next email. My boss wants all the store managers to participate in raising money for Donald Trump's possible reelection in 2024. He mentioned that if we do not participate in this fundraiser, we will not receive our end of the year bonus. I need the bonus, but I do not want to participate in political posturing. Should I have this conversation with my boss or speak to HR? Ariel, let's start with you with that one.
Well, I think earning a bonus has really nothing to do with, your political, views or support. So I would speak with someone higher up to somebody earn their bonus. They earned their bonus regardless of their choices or their preferences and their political preferences, and supporting their political choices.
Absolutely. David, your thoughts on that?
Bonuses should be based on performance of the company or the individual. Political activities don't really have a place within the workplace. If the employer wanted to create like a political PAC, that's great, and ask people to contribute to it. But there should be no coercion or anything like that. I would personally, if it were me, I would avoid the conversation and say that I'm trying, but you just didn't try that hard, to avoid future repercussions against the employee.
Absolutely. Okay. Great perspective on that. And Sabrina, let's hear your perspective on that. I know you've been in corporate for many years, so what would you say in that? You're on mute.
Standpoint of,
No, you're fine. I can hear you.
Am I still?
Nope, you're there. I can hear you.
Okay. I would have the conversation from the standpoint of, can you please send me in writing? Okay. Can you please send me in writing the details of the bonus, the qualifications of the bonus? So that's in print. That way I can see if I met the qualifications of the bonus. And that that way there's no conversation about the political issue, because if that had not been established up front and I met those qualifications, then I expect my bonus. So that's the way, being a corporate girl. And I would kind of fire that off an email or put my request in writing so that I would get their response manager back in writing. And then if things didn't resolve, I would escalate to HR, but only after I've given my immediate manager an opportunity to resolve it. Fair practice, fair, open communication.
Absolutely. And just to add my little 2 cents in, being that I'm in the HR field, I would definitely have a conversation, but I'm going to have it with HR first. And the reason why I would do that is because if a boss is that audacious to place a condition on, if a person wants to support a political party that they may not even necessarily affiliate themselves with, and you discount their merit and their performance and place that affiliation as far as if they're going to get the bonus that they've earned, to me, that boss will also have the audacious inclination to be able to just have some repercussions against you. They will definitely retaliate. So in order to protect yourself, you need to go to HR. They will also be able to give you more details on the code of conduct. And if it is out of line, even if they have outlined that this is what it should be, if it does not fall in line with the code of conduct in the handbook, then obviously there's a problem. So my guess, my personal opinion is to always protect yourself first. You can give your boss that leeway to want to, have them explain themselves and you kind of share your perspective, but you always want to protect yourself because you just never know what a person's inclination and their behavior will be based off of your actions. So always protect yourself first. The last thing we want to do is we want to go right into the Uncomfortable Conversations Challenge. And David, that is what you're going to do. And what you'll do in this challenge is there's going to be 10 questions that Sabrina is going to ask you. And these questions may seem surface level. They may seem very shallow on the forefront, but what it really does is it gives the listener an opportunity to get the perspective directly from someone who they may not interact with on a daily basis. Okay. So there's no right or wrong answer. It is completely your perspective. And with that being said, I'm going to be the timekeeper. Sabrina, are you ready for this?
Buzz
Can't
out.
hear you, Sabrina. All right.
I said, I'm ready, Ricky. If I buzz out, take over, Ricky. Okay. So you ready, Ricky?
All right. And no pressure, David.
Difficulty going on here. Okay. No pressure. Okay, we ready?
Ready.
What's up, Ricky? All right. Number 1, David, if you had one wish, what would that wish be? What would you wish for and why?
Get rid of social media because it's all it's done is instead of bringing people together, it's torn people apart.
Okay. Name your favorite and worst quality about yourself.
Worst quality, not the most outward showing of feelings, kind of more held cards together. Best quality is a giver.
Okay. Can you give me the name of 5 Black men that do not play sports? And if you can't do that, why?
Do you want the names?
Yes. Names of 5 Black men that do not play sports.
Robert Hamilton, Barack Obama, George Jones, James Earl Jones, the actor, Kevin Hart.
Nice.
I pulled out my brother.
You think Black people observe?
What's that?
I love it, David. Do you think Black people deserve reparation for the suffering they endured in the U.S.?
I think something needs to be done. I'm not sure about reparations in terms of that. I think something should be done, but it has to be measured to the impact. I'm not sure I don't know what the solution is for that one. Because whenever we throw money at something, it doesn't always fix what we're throwing the money at. It creates more problems. But I think something should be done. And I think we've long had institutions in the U.S. that have helped maintain these issues instead of help fix them.
Okay. If you met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., what question would you like to ask him and why?
I would ask him if I could attend his services so that I could, like in a front row type seat, so that I could get to better know him and feel the power of his speeches. You know, it's one thing to hear things, but it's very different to be in person with somebody that's a influential person like that. Where, you know, because when you surround yourself with influential people, part of their energy is absorbed by you. Next.
Okay. When was the first time you heard about Black slavery, and how did it impact the way you viewed Black people?
Probably the first time was probably as a kid in elementary school, and it wasn't necessarily, you know, it was probably like one of those like third grade history classes. It didn't really, the magnitude of the impact didn't really register. It was, Christopher Columbus came over on the Santa Maria or something like that, and then there was slavery and other things like that. I think contextually we don't provide enough context or depth on why and how things happen in a good aspect for that. You know.
Okay. All right. So what books are you reading or have you read that has helped you understand racial injustice among Black people?
I haven't read any books right now. I'm in a startup, so I don't have as much capacity to read things right now as I should. Yeah, I don't have anything right now.
Okay, fair statement. Fair statement. If you have to give a keynote presentation to a group of Black Lives Matter members, what would be your topic?
My theme would be to focus on how an individual can achieve anything in life based on their own determination. And that, you know, instead of trying to latch on to a cause or something like that, segregate the individual from all the noise and focus on what they can do to improve their life. Because, you know, all the organizations in the world may have well doing, but, you know, it's the individual that makes the difference.
Okay, so if your best friend was having an affair with a married man, what conversation would you have with her? Would you love it or leave it alone?
My best friend is female or male?
Well, her. So your best friend's a female. And
Okay, female having an affair with somebody else. The conversation would be focused on what's the rationale for what you're doing. If you're not in love with the person that you're married to, you know, you should be honest with the other person, or see if it's going to make sense. And then I would also point out to them, critical thing is that cheaters get cheated on. So, you know, they really need to evaluate what they're doing, because at some point in time, the table's going to be turned back on them. I mean, think about the morality of the person you're with. That if they're willing to cheat with you, what's going to prevent them from doing that on them? And how they're going to feel.
All right. And we are at time. So thank you so much, David, for doing the challenge. A lot of people, they stumble on those questions, but you attack those and you address those directly. So thank you so much for that. This was an amazing show. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ariel, for all your insight on the topic of marijuana use and is it ethical or unethical. Each week, we're going to continue to bring in topics like this that are very controversial, but the topics must be had because these decisions, these issues are not going away. So we can just leave it in the, we can place it to the side, but all it does is create tension when we need to focus on the truth. So each week we'll do that. And with our listeners, if you are wanting to have some of these questions answered, reach us at uncomfortableconversationsTMG@yahoo.com. Thank you to our engineer, Alan, and also thank you to the creator of this platform, Daryl. And with that being said, we will speak to you next week. Enjoy your week, have an uncomfortable conversation, and start to build that connection that will lead to collaboration.
You can follow our hosts on Facebook. Search Trendsetter Mentor Group. Join. Email your uncomfortable conversation questions to npartners@yahoo.com. We will address your questions on next week's show. Let's have that conversation.